man is back.
Oh, okay, Jay boys, oh my gosh, the man got that stuff. This is a 5 out of freaking 5.
It is beat making time.
Next week is E3 week. My album comes out next week.
I have the leopard.
This is your boy. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, the YouTube citizens, y'all know who this is. This is your boy Dash, the True Inferno. Back at it with another Pokemon Unite commentary video gameplay for you guys. And ladies and gentlemen, college football is back. Now, it's already started last week with some games. Obviously, the biggest game that we saw was Florida State going to Dublin Island, of all places, taking on an unranked Georgia Tech team and losing. Florida State was ranked 10th going into the season, and they lost. So, obviously, which is funny because they haven't really dropped the new rankings, which I find odd. But yeah, Florida State now off to a good spot. They're not off to a good start at all. Now, we got the 12 team playoff rather. So I understand that, yeah, that's how you can still lose some games and still get in. But when you look at Florida State's schedule, it's not looking good. But we're going to get to that in a second. So I'm going to go through each teams that are potentially have a shot or are favored to get into the college football playoff. And I'm going to predict what their record would be at the end of the regular season. Now, this does not include the conference championship game. I will talk about those, throughout this video. And then I'm going to give you my 12 teams that I think will get in and ultimately who I think will be the national champion. So let's start with the ACC. We're going to start off with the Big Four. So those are the ones we're going to be talking about. There's really 4 now. Once upon a time, there was 5 with the Pac-12. But seeing how there's only Oregon State and Washington State left in that conference, it's pretty much dead. So we got the Big Four. So we're talking the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC. And that's it. Now, again, starting off with the ACC, one team that's favored to win the ACC is Clemson. Clemson currently ranked 14th. And here's what their schedule looks like. They got a neutral game against Georgia, who is ranked number 1. A home game against North Carolina State, who is ranked 24th. A road game against Florida State. And then they got a stretch where they had to host Louisville, go on the road against Virginia Tech, and go on the road against Pitt, and then they face South Carolina. Now, which is like an in-state rivalry. That's the end of the year or end of the regular season game right there. Now, I see Clemson going 10-2, but they still make it to the AFC Conference Championship game, where I see them going against this team, the 19th ranked Miami Hurricane squad. So they're going to start things off with a road game against Florida, and then they have a home game against Virginia Tech. Now, I'm not naming every single team that these teams are facing. I'm naming some teams that could potentially give these teams a challenge. So there you go with that. And then they got a road game against Cal, who is now in the ACC, which is crazy. They got a road, and then this stretch is crazy. This stretch is crazy. They got a road game against Louisville. Then they're at home against formerly 10th ranked Florida State. Home game against Duke, and then a road game against the team that beat Florida State in the form of Georgia Tech. And I see them losing one game. It's going to be within that stretch. I don't know what game it is. It could be Florida State. It could be Louisville. It could be Georgia Tech. I see them losing one game, Miami. Otherwise, they have a pretty good schedule, and they sit at the 19th spot. They don't need to be ranked in the top 12 or whatever. All they need to do is win their conference. And I think they're going to do that. I think they're going to take on Clemson. And I think they go to beat Clemson. I see Miami getting one of those 4 spots. In fact, I see Miami getting the number 4 spot going into the college football playoff. And I'll explain how the seeding will work once we get to that point. And then, of course, the other team is Florida State. Y'all probably wondering, well, about Florida State? Well, obviously, they lost to Georgia Tech on the neutral field. They have a home game against Cal. They have a home game against Clemson, a road game against Duke, and then they got this stretch where they have to go on the road against 19th-ranked Miami. They get North Carolina at home. Then they go on the road against 7th-ranked Notre Dame. And, of course, they end the year in that in-state rivalry against Florida. I see Florida State losing 3 games. They already lost 1. I see them losing 2 more. They won't be playing for the ACC Conference Championship game, and they will not make the college football playoff. Now, let's move on to the Big 12, So, the Big 12 looks like this. We got the 21st-ranked Arizona squad, and there's not a lot with these teams in their scheduling. But Arizona, they got Kansas State, who is ranked 18. That's the road game. And then they got a bye. And then they got a road game against Utah. I seen them losing both those games. Every other game that Arizona have, I seen them winning. So I see Arizona going 10-2. Not going to the Big 12 Conference Championship game. And obviously not going to the college football playoffs. Next up is Kansas, who is ranked right behind Arizona. They are 22nd. They got 2 road games that we're going to highlight. A road game against Illinois and a road game against 18th-ranked Kansas State, quote-unquote. It's an in-state rivalry. But I still see Kansas losing one game, and it's that road, quote-unquote, road game against Kansas State. So I see them going 11-1. Now we got Kansas State, who is currently ranked 18th. They got the Arizona team that come in their house, ranked 21st, by the way. Then they got a home game against Oklahoma State, who's ranked 17th. Then they got a road game against Colorado, and then a home game against Kansas, who's ranked 22nd. Now, Kansas State is set up to win the table, but I see them losing one game. I think they're going to lose the Oklahoma State game, also putting them at 11-1. Speaking of Oklahoma State, let's talk about them. They got a home game against 12th ranked Utah, and then, of course, they got a road game against Kansas State, quote-unquote. We already talked about that already. And then they got a road game against Colorado. Now, here's the thing about that one. They could also win the table, although they got that road game against Kansas State, which is going to be tough. And in fact, I don't see them, well, I see them losing at home against Utah. I see them winning as the road team against Kansas State or whatever. Oh yeah, that's Oklahoma State. I see them winning on the road rather against Kansas State. But I see them losing at home to Utah. So they will also be 11-1. Speaking of Utah, let's talk about them. They're currently ranked 12th, and they got road games against 17th ranked Oklahoma State. And then after that, they got a home game against 21st ranked Arizona. And then, of course, somewhere down in the future, they got a road game against Colorado. Now, here's the thing. I see Utah winning. I see Utah winning the table. I'm not joking. I'm dead serious. I see Utah winning the table and going undefeated and going into the Big 12 Conference Championship game. And it doesn't matter which one of those 3 teams, Kansas, Kansas State, or Oklahoma State. I think that's like a 3-way tie scenario. No, wait. I think Oklahoma State will go on because they would have beaten Kansas State. That would have beaten Kansas. And Oklahoma State doesn't play Kansas. So I think Oklahoma State will go on, but they will ultimately lose to Utah again. So I see Utah not only going to the college football playoffs, I see them going unbeaten. And I will talk about their ranking in a second. Now, let's move on to the Big Ten. And this one going to break my heart a little bit. But we're going to start things off with 25th ranked Iowa. So, check out this stretch. They got a road game against 2nd ranked Ohio State. Then they're at home against Washington. Then they got a road game against Michigan State. So, that's back to back to back. And then, of course, they got Wisconsin at home later on. I see Iowa going 10-2. So, obviously, you got them losing against Ohio State. And then they're going to lose one of those remaining 3 games, whether it's Washington, Wisconsin, or Michigan State. They're going to go 10-2. Then we got Michigan. The reigning defending national champs, my squad, Go Blue. They're currently ranked 9th, which I think is kind of low, but whatever. They got a tough schedule. They got a home game against 4th ranked Texas. Another home game against 23rd ranked USC. Then they go on the road against Washington, the team that they beat to be national champions. Then they got a home game against 3rd ranked Oregon, and then they go on the road against 2nd ranked Ohio State. So they got the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd ranked squads on their schedule, which is crazy. And I'm going to be honest, I see them winning those first 3 games, but losing those last 2, unfortunately. So I got Michigan going 10-2. So there you go with that. Could they still make the college football playoff? We have to wait and see. Because they got, like I said, I got them winning against Texas, which will be big for them. So there you go with that. Now let's talk about crappy Ohio State, who is currently ranked 2nd. And they got this stretch where they got a road game against Michigan State. Then they are home against 25th ranked Iowa. Then they're on the road against 3rd ranked Oregon. So there you go with that. They also got a road game against 8th ranked Penn State. And then they got a home game against Michigan. I see Ohio State losing only 1 game, unfortunately. Not 2, not 3, just 1. And it would be that road game against Oregon. So, yes, I got Ohio State losing on the road against Oregon, which means, even though I hate this, I got Ohio State winning at home against Michigan. I don't like it, but that's how things are looking right now. So, I got Ohio State going 11-1 and is one of the 2 teams that will go to the Big Ten Conference Championship game. By the way, there's no divisions in any of these conferences with the exception of 1, but it's not amongst these Power 4. So, there's no divisions anymore. They removed that nonsense. So, at least that's good. So, there's that. Now let's move on to Oregon, who is currently ranked 3rd. And they got this stretch where they got home games against Michigan State. Then the next week, they got a home game against Ohio State, ranked 2nd. Then they go on the road against Purdue, which those going to be tough. I see them winning all those games. And then they got a road game against Michigan, and then they got a road game against Wisconsin, then a bye week, then they're at home against Washington. I actually see Oregon winning the table here, unfortunately. I see, which means they have to beat Michigan, unfortunately. But I see them winning the table, and I see them going on to the Big Ten Conference Championship game. So there's the two teams right off the bat: Ohio State against Oregon in a rematch. I'll talk about who will win in a second, but there's two more teams right there that we got to talk about. Penn State, who currently ranked 8th. They rank too high. They should be ranked behind Michigan. But check this out. I got them. Let's see. They got a road game against 23rd ranked USC. Then a bye week separate them from their next road game, which would be against Wisconsin. And then at some point, they got a home game against Ohio State, ranked 2nd. Then a home game against Washington. And then this stretch right here. This is a 4-game stretch right here. So a road game against Washington, home game against Ohio State, another home game against, I messed up. That road game, that's Wisconsin. Then they got a home game against Ohio State, then a home game against Washington, and then a road game against Purdue. I see Penn State losing 2 games. I see them lose to, first of all, they're losing against Ohio State, that's one. And I think it'll be Wisconsin. It's either going to be Wisconsin or USC, but I'm leaning more towards Wisconsin. So, yeah, I see them losing 2 games, Penn State, that is. Now we look at USC, who's currently ranked 23rd. They got a neutral game against LSU, who is currently ranked 13th. And then check out this stretch. They got a road game against Michigan, and then a home game against Wisconsin. And then after that, so that's back-to-back. And then at some point, they got a home game against 8th-ranked Penn State, and then a road game against Washington. And then they got this stretch where they got a road game against their rivals, UCLA, and then they're at home against Notre Dame. I see USC going 7-5. I see them going 7-5. Like some experts got them worse, like 6-6, something like that. I'm like, I don't see them losing 6 games, but I see them losing 5, and one of them will be on the road against Michigan, by the way. So there you go with that. Now, in terms of the Big Ten matchup, the rematch of Ohio State and Oregon, I got Oregon winning, running the table, and remaining undefeated, and they're going to be 12-0. Now, where would they be ranked in the college football playoff scenario? We'll talk about that later on. Now, let's move on to the SEC, and there's a lot of powerhouses here. So this is clearly, you can make a strong case. This conference is the best conference with the Big Ten in close second. So here we go. Alabama is ranked 5th for some strange reason. I think they're a bit too high in that, but whatever. They got a road game against Wisconsin, and then they got a home game against Georgia, who's currently ranked number 1. Then check this stretch out. They got a road game against Tennessee, who's ranked 15. Then they're at home to host 11th-ranked Missouri. And then sometime after that, they got a road game against 13th-ranked LSU, a road game against 16th-ranked Oklahoma, and then, of course, they got their home game against Auburn. I see Alabama going 10-2 here. I see them losing to Georgia, and I see them losing to LSU. So there you go with that. Now, this one going to shock you. Let's talk about Georgia, who is currently number 1 in the nation. Now, we already talked about this already. They got that neutral game against 14th-ranked Clemson. Then check this stretch out. They got a road game against Alabama. And then they're at home against Auburn. And then a home game against Mississippi State. Then they're on the road against Texas, who is ranked 4th. Alabama ranked 5th, by the way. And then they got another stretch where they got to go on the road to take on 6th-ranked Ole Miss. And then they're at home against 15th-ranked Tennessee. I see Georgia going 10-2. Yes, that's a shocker. Georgia going 10-2. I see them losing the road against Texas and on the road against Ole Miss. And that's it. I see them beating Alabama. I see them beating Tennessee. But they got so much, man. It's a lot of teams that they got to deal with. I don't think they're going to get through this season undefeated. So I got them losing 2 games. Now, let's talk about LSU. They got a neutral game against USC, which we talked about already, 23rd ranked USC. Now, they got a stretch as well. So check this out. They got a home game against Ole Miss. And then they got another home game against Arkansas. Then they go on the road against Texas A&M. And then they got another stretch where they got to host 5th-ranked Alabama. Then they go on the road against Florida. And then, of course, they got to host 16th-ranked Oklahoma. I see LSU going 10-2 as well, losing to Texas A&M and losing to Florida. But they beat everybody else, which include beating Alabama, which I already said. Now let's take a look at Missouri, who is ranked 11th. They got a road game against 20th-ranked Texas A&M. Then they got a stretch where they got to be at home against Auburn to go on the road against 5th-ranked Alabama. Then they got another stretch where they got to host 16th-ranked Oklahoma. They go on the road against South Carolina. They go on the road against Mississippi State, and then they come at home against Arkansas. I see them losing 2 games, Texas A&M and Alabama. All right, let's move on to 16th-ranked Oklahoma. So they got this 2-game stretch where they got to host 15th-ranked Tennessee. Then they go on the road against Auburn. And then they got another stretch where they got to take on, the old river rivalry, Texas, obviously 4th ranked. Then they got a home game against South Carolina. Then they go on the road against 6th ranked Ole Miss. And then they got 11th ranked Missouri. And then they got another stretch to end the year where they got to go against 5th ranked Alabama at home. Then they go on the road against 13th ranked LSU. Oklahoma losing 4 games. I got them going 8-4. Now, let's move on to Ole Miss. So, Ole Miss, 6th ranked Ole Miss, they got a little bit of a stretch early where they got to go on the road twice. They got South Carolina, then they go on the road against 13th ranked LSU. Then they got another stretch where they got to deal with Oklahoma, who is, all these are at home, by the way, this next stretch. 16th ranked Oklahoma, then Arkansas, then number 1 ranked Georgia. And then they got another stretch to end the year where they go on the road against Florida, and then they're at home against Ole Miss. Mississippi State, excuse me. I actually got Ole Miss going 11-1. That only loss come at the hands of LSU. So, yes, I got them beating Georgia. I already said that already. Now let's look at Tennessee. So, Tennessee got a neutral game against 24th ranked NC State. They got a road game against 16th ranked Oklahoma. Then they got this stretch where they'll be at home against Florida. And then the next week, 5th ranked Alabama comes to town. And then they have to, later on in the year, deal with a road game against number 1 ranked Georgia. Tennessee winning, they're going 93. They're going 93. I see them losing to Alabama, Georgia, and I believe the other game is Oklahoma, if memory serves correctly. It's either that or North Carolina State. Either way, Tennessee losing 3 games. I got them going 93. Speaking of 93, that's where I got Texas A&M, who are ranked 20th. They got a home game. I believe that's a home game. Yeah, it's a home game against 7th ranked Notre Dame. Then they got a road game against Florida, later in the year, whatever. Now, they got this stretch. Oh, this is a huge stretch. They got a neutral game against Arkansas, home game against 11th ranked Missouri. They go on the road against Mississippi State. They are at home against 13th ranked LSU. And then they end that stretch on the road against South Carolina. And then they got another stretch, like a mini stretch to end the year, where they have to deal with Auburn on the road. And then they will, quote unquote, host 4th ranked Texas. I got Texas A&M losing 3 games, like I said. I believe they're going to beat Texas. No, they're going to lose to Texas, excuse me. And then, yeah, they're going to lose to Texas. So that's one of the games. I got, if memory serves correctly, I believe I got them losing to Notre Dame? I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know they're going to lose 3 games. So I'm not going to try and remember who I got them losing to. LSU. They're going to lose to LSU. If memory serves correct. No. They're going to beat LSU. So I don't remember who the third is. But bottom line is, Texas A&M, they're going 93. And then we got Texas, who is currently ranked 4th. So they got a road game early on against my Michigan Wolverines. They also got a home game against Mississippi State. And then after that, then they got this stretch where they got to be at a neutral field, the Red Ribbon rivalry against 16th ranked Oklahoma. We all talked about that. And then they'll be at home against Georgia right after that, literally right after that. Then they got another stretch where they'll be at home against Florida. And then they're on the road against Arkansas. And then, of course, they're going to end the year against 20th ranked Texas A&M. And I got Texas going 10-2. So I got them losing against Michigan and losing against Georgia, but beating everybody else. And they would be in the Big 12 Conference Championship game where they would take on Ole Miss and lose to Ole Miss. So, yeah, we already got our 4 conference champions. Now, there could be another conference champion that could get the top 4, but we'll talk about that in a second. But we need to talk about Notre Dame. The only reason why we talk about Notre Dame is because they're ranked 7th and they are an independent team, 1 out of the 3. The other, I forgot. I know one of them Connecticut. The other one is irrelevant. Well, both of them are irrelevant, but you get the point. Notre Dame. So they got a road game against Texas A&M, which we talked about already. They got a road game against Purdue. They got a home game against Louisville, and then they got this 2-game stretch where they play Stanford and Georgia Tech back-to-back at home. They got Florida State at home, and then they go on the road against USC. I actually got Notre Dame going 10-2. So, yeah, there you go with that. And so here's the thing. We got to talk about these two. We got Liberty, who I got as the Conference USA champs, and Memphis, who would be the AAC champs. Not the ACC, the AAC. So, yeah, there's 2 of those, ACC and AAC. So, yeah, there you go with that. And out of those 2, because here's the thing. Here's where the playoff format comes to play. 12 teams will get in. Out of those 12, 5 of them will be conference champs. So the 4 conference champs that are ranked the highest will get spots 1 through 4 in a first round bye. And then, of course, the 5th conference champ. Wherever they rank, they're going to be there. But they're ranked outside the top 12, they're going to get that 12th spot, which will be the case between Liberty and Memphis. I do not see either one ranking in the top 12, so they're going to get that 12th spot. Now, which one is it, though? It's going to be Liberty. I think Liberty will have a better record over Memphis. I think Liberty's schedule is really, really good. I like Liberty as the Conference USA champs and to get in the college football playoff. Although it don't matter because whoever they play, they're going to get annihilated. So let's talk about who's going to play who. So based on what I said, let's talk about the other conference champs. So remember, I got Miami, Utah, Oregon, and Ole Miss. And my number 1 seed will go to Oregon. They will win the table. They're in the Big Ten. They ranked 3rd. If they rank 3rd and won the table, that means they're going to be number 1. So, bam, there you go with that. I got Utah as another undefeated team. They were ranked 12th, so they're going to move up. They got games against 2 ranked opponents. They could be higher as the season goes on. Oh, who knows? But Utah won the table in the Big 12. I got their number 2. I got Ole Miss number 3 and Miami number 4. So there's my top 4 in terms of the other conference champions. And of course, Liberty, the 5th conference champion, will be the number 12 seed. And they will take on Georgia as the number 5 seed. I got Texas as the number 6 seed, Ohio State number 7, Alabama number 8, and they will take on number 9 Michigan. Clemson number 10 will take on Ohio State. Penn State number 11 take on Texas, and of course Liberty will get destroyed by Georgia. So Georgia will move on to take on Miami. I think Michigan will actually upset Alabama and will move on in a rematch to take on Oregon. This time it would be in Oregon's house. I got Texas defeating Penn State, so Texas taking on Ole Miss, which I believe is not a rematch, if memory serves me correctly. No, no, that's not true. It's a rematch of the conference championship game. And then I got Ohio State knocking off Clemson, so they're going to take on Utah. So, and here's where I'm going to have to share the tier. Cause I got Oregon beating Michigan rather, again, which I'm not thrilled about. And then I got Georgia beating Miami. I got Ole Miss beating Texas, again. And I got Ohio State beating Utah. We set up our semis. I got Ole Miss beating Ohio State and Georgia beating Ole Miss. So, yes, we have an SEC national championship game. That does not include Alabama, thank goodness. But it's still, I still got Georgia winning even though they lost to Ole Miss on the road. But this is a neutral field. They gotten better over time. I got Georgia knocking off Ole Miss in the rematch. There's a number of rematches that'll be going down here in my predictions. But nevertheless, I got Georgia winning the national championship, but not as the number 1 seed who ran the table and just beat everybody in their schedule. No, they're going to suffer some losses. They're not going to win their own conference championship. They're not even going to play in their own conference championship, but yet they're going to bounce back and win the national championship over the SEC champs, Ole Miss. That's what I got win the SEC. So there you go with that. And yeah, leave your predictions in the comment section below. Obviously, everybody's predictions is going to be different. So there you go with that. I'm going to call it a wrap. So with all that said, y'all know who this is. This is your boy New J Gatsby, a.k.a. New Stephen A. Smith, saying peace out, y'all, and I'll see y'all next time. Yeah.